Jim Sims is our second speaker. He is an award-winning evaluation speaker, and he has also been, he admitted himself to be a Toastmaster addict. Yes, he is one. I am too, but I think he's more hardcore than I am. Regardless of what you think, well, welcome. Please welcome Jim Sims to the front.
I seem a little corny, and despite my tweeting on the internet, sending various emails out and so forth, I am not sure, unless there's a secret evaluator in the audience, that I had one. Beautiful, beautiful. Okay. What do we want to turn this down? Okay, we could do that. That's easy enough. Excellent. All right. The title of my speech is Meet Clarence and Charles Schweppes. Life can change dramatically in a single moment, and that was never more evident than in Nashville earlier this week, when 6 lives were lost in a single moment by a deranged shooter. And one other way that life can change is, how many of you have ever had to rush someone to the hospital, or maybe you've been in a car or even an ambulance and someone rushed you to the emergency room? Okay, very good. Some others might want to forget that experience. Well, welcome to my world. Sunday, February 26th, I had the opportunity to go to St. Joe's North, which is 3 miles from where I live. It's a fabulous hospital. I'd like to say that my wife was really ready to drive at breakneck speed, but Tina has never driven at breakneck speed. However, I did urge her at 4 a.m. in the morning that it'd be okay to go through the red light at Dale Mabry and Van Dyke. She hesitated a little bit, but then she made the left turn and headed about a half a mile, couple of blocks to St. Joe's. Now, how did that come about? Well, I've been having pain in my groin for a while. I was thinking maybe I'd go to the doc in the box. And my wife said, well, you could go to the doc in the box, but they're just going to send you to the emergency room. I also thought maybe I could call my urologist and make an appointment for the next day. The pain was getting a little bit more intense, 8 or a 9 on a scale of 10. And I usually think of myself as having a pretty good threshold for pain. But she said, he might not even be there. You don't even know if you'll get an appointment. So I'd like to say that this pain in my groin came from me bench pressing 400 pounds. But that would be an exaggeration at best. It would actually be an outright lie. I wasn't doing anything that brought this pain on, as far as I can tell. And I had spent some 17 years with my volunteer ambulance corps, the Little Neck Douglaston Volunteer Ambulance Corps, usually rode on a Sunday night from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. with my buddy, Barry Reitman. We were a team with the 2 other people. And it's really a lot easier picking someone up and taking them to the ambulance than being that person that needs to be rushed quickly to the hospital. And don't all these things happen at 4 a.m.? Sure they do. At 4 a.m. in the morning. At least there was no traffic on Dale Mabry. I got to St. Joe's North and met Dr. Jennifer Locke. She was the emergency room physician on call at the hospital. They did just a couple of tests, urinalysis, Doppler, and very shortly thereafter, she said, you got a hernia. Didn't even equivocate, didn't say you might have a hernia. She says, you have a hernia and you should go make an appointment with Dr. Quantron at Baycare. Dr. Quantron is literally next door. His office is next door to the hospital. Brian Tracy, who has delivered over 5,000 speeches, is a motivational speaker. And he said, when you give a story, when you tell a story, it gets our attention. It activates our emotions and it's memorable. So I certainly hope sharing the information that I have about Clarence and his brother, Charles Schweppes, will be of some interest. And in a story, you need a hero. A hero is somebody who slays the dragon. Dr. Tran was well equipped to slay dragons because he had been doing this for about 22 years. He has graduated with honors from the University of Alabama, Birmingham School of Medicine. He also is a member of the College of Surgeons, really, really well equipped at 7:15 in the morning to slay the dragon. The dragon wasn't an actual dragon, it was an inguinal hernia. And an inguinal hernia is something that's much more likely to be involved with men than with women. And I had a sword too. My sword wasn't as equipped as Dr. Tran, but I was well prepared at 7:15 in the morning too. We were all both ready to go in there because my sword was Dr. Google. I did a little bit of research in the short amount of time that I had to go and check with Dr. Google. Now, an inguinal hernia, it affects 27% of men and only 3% of women. As you get older, it's one of the things you have to look forward to if you ever get old, is if you're a 75-year-old man, you have 18 times the likelihood of having an inguinal hernia than a 24-year-old man. You also can't fix them. They don't get fixed. You can live with a hernia for a while, but it could get worse, and it could also strangle your intestines with unprepared pain, and it could be actually life-threatening. 750,000 inguinal hernias are performed in the United States every year, and 20 million globally. What happens is it's a defect in the tissue in the abdomen, a hole, allowing the contents of the intestines to protrude and become trapped. And one of the ways that you address it is with the Da Vinci robot. Anybody ever hear the Da Vinci robot? Anybody have laparoscopic surgery? You probably had the Da Vinci robot, even though you don't remember anyone telling you that it was the Da Vinci robot. It's a 3D high definition camera, also has 2 arms. So basically I have just 3 little holes, one for the camera and 2 for the arms. And back in 2012, when I was investigating prostate cancer, I got to go to Trinity Hospital, which had just gotten the Da Vinci robot, cost over $1 million. I'd like to tell you they let me perform a minor surgery, but they didn't do that. But I did get to pick up a pencil with the robot. What happens is the doctor sits at a console right near the patient, and the rest of the team is right next to the patient. And what he does is like a computer. I guess if you play computer games, you might be well equipped to either be a fighter pilot or maybe a laparoscopic surgeon. What you don't do is ask the surgeon questions 10 minutes before the surgery. I didn't have a chance to ask him the questions before that. He was on vacation. It was Sunday morning. This was Tuesday. So I didn't have a whole lot of time to ask him questions, but I asked him about the hernia recurrence rate. I read that the open surgery, which happens maybe with people that can't handle anesthesia, sometimes older patients, that it had about a 2% recurrence, and the laparoscopic surgery had a 4% recurrence. And he looked at my statistics, he looked at some of my stories, and he said, before he said that it's the gold standard, laparoscopic surgery is the gold standard, he said about my statistics, bullshit. That's what he said. So I thought he didn't really have a nice manner, but he was upfront, and he was ready to answer my questions rather quickly. I asked him, do you use tacks, staples, or glue? He said he uses glue to put a mesh in. A lot of controversy when it first came out about 20 years ago. The mesh goes over a hole and it kind of helps it heal. I asked him, do you use lightweight mesh? He goes, yes. And then I asked him about post-surgery pain. I read there could be a 10% chance of post-surgery pain and sometimes even long-term pain. He says, you're not going to have any pain. And he says, if you do, I'm going to send you to somebody else. I'd like to, the surgery definitely went really, really well. I recovered with Tylenol. First 3 nights, I didn't want to be in bed. I didn't want to be lying flat. So I went to sleep in the recliner. I kind of don't like hydrocodone, so I went with the Tylenol. What's important is listening to your body. And I want to share with you a story of Frank Brody. Frank Brody is someone who didn't listen to his body. and he should have. It was 1984. He was also with Little Neck Ferguson Ambulance, a volunteer just like me. And it was about 2 in the morning. I wasn't on duty that night, but it was about 2 in the morning that Frank called the ambulance. And we in turn got the New York City paramedics there as well. And he had pain in his chest. They describe it sometimes like an elephant sitting on your chest. And that's not necessarily always there, but it was in his case. And what happened is he died in the arms of his fellow volunteers. And when we learned later on, what we learned is that he had those pains for about 6 hours. So I'd like to tell you that Clarence, I like to give a name to my hernia, and you can certainly name them. You might have a heart attack, you want to call him Big Al. And much to my surprise, the doctor later told me that you have a second hernia. I called him Clarence Schweppes, Schweppes being the ginger ale that I was drinking at that time. So I just closed telling you that both Clarence and Charles.
Yeah, you're over by 3 minutes.
Thank you. Clarence and Charles are behaving themselves and they're getting used to their mesh companions.